If you're just joining us, do like and subscribe. I'm very honoured to be joined today by Justin Beck. Justin Beck is a gay man who is a survivor of so-called conversion therapy, which is a form of torture, which all too many LGBTQ people in this country and beyond have been put through. And the reason, well, there's always a good reason to talk about this, but it's particularly important at the moment given the context of the LGBTQ advisory board to the government being disbanded after several members or some of the members quit, one of which accused the government of not allow of making this country not a safe space for LGBTQ people, and also question marks over whether the government will properly ban this heinous practice in this country. So, Justin, it's a huge honor to have you.
Thank you.
I just want to start with a cliched question, which for those who are watching who are straight, cis, which means not trans, so not LGBTQ, which is, when did you first realize you were different, which is often the term we use, just so everyone is aware?
Yes. 13 is the answer to that question. 13 was when I realized that I was attracted to boys, but prior to that, I was born and raised in an evangelical, born-again Christian family in Glasgow. A lot of our social activities centred around the church and being Christian, developing a faith, the importance of God in our lives. So to kind of put a bit of context around that, Mondays would be teen club, Wednesdays would be Bible study, Thursdays would be discovery group, where you take a book of the Bible and you dig deep into what the meanings are for your life as a Christian and what that means for missionary work and spreading the word of Jesus. So developing a faith was obviously very formative in shaping me as a young child. So then at 13, to kind of answer your question, at 13, realizing that I was attracted to other boys, it made sense for me to go to the Bible to kind of see what God made of that. And I think one of the most famous verses in the Bible is in Leviticus, where it says, "A man shall not lie with a man the way that he lies with a woman." So for me at 13, that sent a very clear signal that it's not homosexuality or gay, because that's not really spoken about. It's same-sex attraction. So same-sex attraction is something that is not accepted in the Bible.
Now, life is a tough gig for many, many people, but it's tougher for some than others. And, you know, being a 13-year-old is hard for lots of people. But for you, as someone who realized you were attracted to members of the same gender in the context in which you were being brought up, what was going through your head? What kind of emotions as you realized increasingly who you were as a person?
Yeah, very, very difficult, very confusing. So again, at 13, realizing that I was attracted to boys, it was then very much a good few years of essentially trying to pray the gay away, because again, what I was taught or what I was brought up to believe was that same-sex attraction was sinful. It was a sin, and it was a big one. God doesn't rate sin, but Christians definitely do. So homosexuality, same-sex attraction was a big one. So I had a good few years of trying to pray the gay away, essentially. At 15, I put myself through full immersion baptism, which is the way that John the Baptist baptized Jesus. So essentially you're kind of like dipped under the water and brought back up again. So 15-year-old Justin very much believed that he would be immersed under the water, struggling with same-sex attraction, and then would come back up out the water and would be cured and would be straight, and everything would be sorted, and you'd be able to kind of continue your life as a heterosexual person. Obviously that didn't work. So then at 17, I left my family church that I'd been brought up in and joined a Pentecostal church in a neighbouring town. And for me, from the ages of 17 to 23, that's where I put myself through 6 years of conversion therapy. Pentecostal churches, I think anyone watching will probably associate Pentecostal churches with the Bible Belt of America, where you see lots of people like holding their hands up and speaking in tongues and falling back. And I think a common misconception is that that's just where Pentecostal churches are, that they're in the Bible Belt of America, whereas they are very much rife in the UK.
Before I ask you about your experience with so-called conversion therapy in the Pentecostal Church, which you joined at the age of 17, when you realised, because 13 to 17 is a long time, and when you're young, 13 to 17 feels like an age.
Yeah.
So when you realised, having done what you did at the age of 15, that it wasn't working, that you were still attracted to people of the same gender, was it panic? What kind of emotions did you feel?
Yeah, it was a complete panic, knowing that being brought up to believe that it was sinful. A lot of what you are taught in through Christianity is to repent. So you're repenting, you're apologizing. And that God has to forgive you. So it's a very sort of negative mindset to remain in for many years, and feeling that it's sinful, and it's slowly chipping away at your self-esteem. I think on the back of that, again, I think we're roughly the same age. So I think all of our educational experience was through Section 28. So there wasn't even the scope that an LGBT charity or youth worker would come into school one day and say, have you heard about LGBT youth groups that you could join? So that option wasn't even available to me, that there could have potentially been another school of thinking for me to even start to think about. So while I was very much immersed in Christianity as a child, there wasn't even the scope out with my family network that somebody would have came in and offered an alternative for me. And then something maybe would have stuck in my head, and I would have thought, oh, wait a minute, that's what I'm thinking about. And I can go away and explore that side. So again, for people of my generation, Queer as Folk was like instrumental in shaping. And I remember like many people watching it on mute in my bedroom, and it was very much interesting to watch, but it wasn't for me. It was just temptation. And that was, again, another religious word. It was temptation that I was giving into through watching this. And then again, that feeded into all the panic that I was feeling about what I was feeling, and again, that something had to be done.
So when you joined the Pentecostal Church at the age of 17, what did you tell the other members that you were attracted to men, and what was the response? And then tell me about what was involved to begin with so-called conversion therapy.
Yeah, so very much. Again, I joined at 17, joined the youth fellowship, and would be involved in all the sort of social activities and developing friendships through that with other children, young people that have been brought up in Christianity. And then with Pentecostal churches, there is always that call at the end of a Sunday service that if anyone's wanting sort of prayer ministry, that you can go down the front. So again, every Sunday for 6 years, I would be going down and I would share with them. And again, because you would never say I'm gay or I'm homosexual, it's just I'm struggling with, this is the sin that I'm struggling with, which was same-sex attraction. So yeah, telling pastors, youth pastors, that that's what I was struggling with. And then every Sunday, going down the front of the church, people laying hands on me, speaking in tongues. And then throughout the 6 years, that would then ramp up, and then look at things like exorcisms, having demons cast out me, and being anointed with holy oil. So again, for 6 years, that chipping away at your self-esteem, the fact that no one would actually say, Justin, you're just gay, and that's okay. So that was never spoken about. So yeah, having that, and then I think something about like an exorcism, there's definitely like an expectation of a reaction. So when someone is laying hands on you and speaking in tongues and you're shaking, and there's the expectation of a reaction to prove that it's working and that the Holy Spirit is moving through you and casting out that demon, it's incredibly emotionally traumatizing. So you would eventually then just give them the reaction that they were looking for, shake, fall back, and then you're lying there completely emotionally traumatized, not really knowing what to do. And from at the early age of 17, you would just lie there thinking, is that it? Is that me? Am I fixed now? Am I normal? And that gives you a real insight into what my headspace was like, and having absolutely zero self-esteem, because for 6 years you're being told that there's something wrong with you, you're broken, and you have to be fixed.
So tell me, I mean, if you're comfortable doing so, some of the practices, what did it actually kind of, the specifics
entail. Yeah. So again, going down for prayer ministry at the front, that's usually where you would meet someone in the church, or pastor or youth person, and they would pray for you. And then when you're saying that you are struggling with same-sex attraction, that's a biggie. So that's when more people are brought in. And then an exorcism is really, really horrible, where that you have everybody laying hands on you, speaking in tongues, which is a made-up language, and there's that because then there's lots of shouting and screaming, and then people are laying their hands on you but actually pushing down. I think there's a Bible verse about casting demons out from the belly, so everyone's kind of holding your belly and pushing on you, which is really scary and traumatizing. And then because I've been brought up in it, I was very much participating in that. So I would be crying, I would be screaming, because at that point I didn't want to be gay. I hated everything about myself and genuinely thought I was evil. So then there would be the reaction where I would scream, I would fall back, and again I would be lying on the ground. People would be laying their hands on me, shouting, screaming in tongues. And essentially casting out a demon. And then I don't know what is the sign that it's worked, but then eventually that stops, and you're left completely alone, because in their head they've done it. The Holy Spirit has moved through them and through me and cast the demon out, and you're just left there. And that's the worst part. When I look back on my experience, the overwhelming emotion that I remember is utter loneliness and having no support system whatsoever.
I mean, for someone, for a lot of people watching this, whatever their sexual orientation, what you're describing, to go through that for a week would be exceptionally hard. We're not talking about a week, we're talking about 6 years.
6 years, yeah.
And you told me, the loneliness, that impact. But if you feel comfortable doing so, what is the mental impact of going through something like that for 6 years? I mean, what impact mentally, emotionally, with no support group, as you say, what toll does that take?
Yeah, I mean, by 23, I was completely suicidal. I had stockpiled medication all over my bedroom and my car, and was fully intending on taking my own life, because at that point I genuinely thought I was evil and it would just be better to not be here. Again, on the flip side of that, I mean, suicide is a mortal sin as well in the Bible, so I probably wasn't doing myself any favors. But no, I was completely suicidal. I hated everything about myself. I genuinely thought I was evil. I wouldn't look in mirrors or windows because I hated what I saw. I hated summer as a season because that tended to be hot, and that's when guys tended to walk about without tops on, and I found that attractive. So then that would be me giving into temptation and sin again. So I actually hated summer and didn't like going outside in the heat, because I knew that I would be giving into temptation by looking at men. So again, 23, I had to remove myself in order to be still on the planet. And I was very, very lucky that one Christmas, just before Christmas, I Googled spirituality, sexuality, counselling, Glasgow, and found a real licensed therapist, and emailed him. And I think I had my first session either on Christmas Eve or the day before Christmas Eve that year. And that was me taking the first steps for what ended up being a decade of person-centered therapy to unpack 23 years of internalized homophobia. And that's the man that saved my life, and is the only reason that I'm here talking to you today.
I mean, lots of other people would have gone through that experience and not taken that step. I mean, was there anything that made you take that step? I mean, because, also linked to this, I'm wondering, did you ever go through phases of trying to convince yourself, oh, maybe this is working, maybe, what I'm going through is horrible, maybe somehow, which is obviously impossible, and it's very important to state that there's no such thing as gay conversion therapy in practice, even if it was desirable, which of course it isn't. But did you go through phases of kind of trying to convince yourself that actually maybe this is working? And then what was it after those years that made you think I need help? I actually just need outside help at this point.
Yeah, I mean, again, when I was around about 19, I went and did missionary work in France, spreading the word of Jesus through street mime, because that's a very effective method, apparently. Um, so yeah, around about 19, I was very much on that track. So I thought, right, okay, well, I'm going to immerse myself in this, because again, the lines that you're told all the time when you're going through this, even when they're not speaking in tongues, is to like, you just have to have faith, immerse yourself in the Bible, love God like a lover. So that's what I was doing. These were the three mantras that I was told. So that's what I was doing. I was immersing myself in the Bible, and then thinking, right, okay, well, I'll go. I know the Bible really well now, so I'm going to go spread the word of Jesus in France. And so that's what I did. And I think that was very, to answer your question, yeah, that was me trying to kind of convince myself that I will just immerse myself in the Bible, become a Christian missionary, eventually probably go to Bible college, become a minister or a pastor, and then that cycle would have just went on and on and on. But it was ultimately the toll on my mental health, and I could see that it was having an impact on my studies. So like, I'm a primary school teacher at the time. I was going, so like I started uni at 20. And I saw it was affecting my grades. I had done really, really well in first and second year when I was immersing myself in the Bible, but then the toll on my mental health, and then in third year, just my grades plummeted. And I thought, no, right, okay, this can't impact the rest of my life. And it was ultimately survival, and that's why I had to remove myself. And again, that's a really difficult transition as well, because I had started that church at 17 and had developed friendships, and then as soon as I left the church in order to survive, I lost all those friendships, and I didn't have any. And then I was because it was the line I was told was, we just don't have enough faith then. And you're like, all right, okay. And then that was the end of that period of my life.
How long did it take, in terms of that person-centered therapy, for you to start thinking to yourself that there's nothing wrong in any sense with being a gay man? And how long did it take you to meet other gay people as friends who became people who you could see were gay people living their lives as gay people, which obviously does
Yeah.
have a big impact on gay people after they come out, when they can see other people with lives who are having happy
Yeah.
lives.
Yeah.
So with those two things, how long did you start to think to yourself, well, actually, there's obviously nothing wrong with me? How long did that take? And I mean, I know that's not an overnight thing, and it would have been conflicting, but
Yeah.
it's just that sense of it. And then with gay people, you got to know.
Yeah, I mean, it was difficult at the start. I think I was kind of perceived to be quite prudish. Again, having no LGBT visibility or awareness at all, a lot of the kind of common things or the language that they used, or things like that, I just had no awareness of at all. So it was a steep learning curve. I'd then doing like online dating and meeting people online, and then in person and things like that. Dating I found very difficult at the start. I think that's a tricky question. I think it took a long time, and then to develop friendships, it was often through relationships. So I'd have relationships with my boyfriends, and then meet their LGBT friends, and have that sort of connection that way. Ultimately meeting my partner and getting engaged, and I was supposed to be married this year, but we've postponed to next year. So kind of meeting someone who truly accepts me for me, and all of my foibles and all of my issues that I have from my past, and just being totally accepted 100%. And then ultimately finding my chosen family has been instrumental in giving me the strength to speak out as openly and strongly as I have done about the ban on conversion therapy.
How would you describe the lasting impact of what you went through? How are you doing today, essentially?
Yeah, but massive. I mean, the impact has been massive. I would say that while I've had my decade of therapy and my therapist is still my safety net, I don't need my sessions anymore, but I know that he's out there if I ever needed him. Having that safety net is absolutely fundamental to me at the moment. Still struggle with my self-esteem at times, suffering from like panic attacks and anxiety very much. I don't think lockdowns helped with that at all, really. But it's still an issue. That's why, again, why I'm speaking out quite openly about it, that any ban has to include religious and faith settings. Since I've been speaking out about it, people have got in touch and have said, like, wanting to kind of meet and have a chat, and is the grass greener on the other side through coming out, because they're still in these churches being taught the same things that I was taught about immersing themselves in the Bible and loving God like a lover and just having faith. So yeah, the lasting impact of it is absolutely massive. It's incredibly damaging, and I am one of the lucky ones. I'm still here. There'll be plenty out there that didn't make it.
Before I ask you about that, how do you feel about looking back, those people at that church who obviously were in leadership positions and put not just you but other people through what you went through?
Yeah, I mean, there were adults in a position of power. Again, I consented to it for 6 years, but as an adult looking back on it now, I was in a very vulnerable position and very open to being manipulated and swayed. I think I'm very concerned that Boris Johnson has come out and said that any sort of ban will still protect people struggling with same-sex attraction. I'm not comfortable saying LGBT people. People struggling with same-sex attraction, they have that protection for pastoral support and prayer. A massive part of any exorcism, any prayer ministry is through prayer. So to me, that's a loophole. It's a loophole that's being protected for religious and faith settings. And I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. That's not a comprehensive ban. If we need to be able to stop people in leadership positions in churches, the ban has to go further than what apparently its current form is.
I mean, how do you feel? As I said at the beginning, the LGBTQ advisory panel set up under Theresa May has now been disbanded after some of its members resigned. One of them accusing the government pointedly of making of Britain no longer being a safe space for LGBTQ people under this government. And then the promises, because promises were made on so-called conversion therapy. How do you feel about what the government are doing and the impact that could have if what you just said in terms of Boris Johnson's letter if that is enacted?
Yeah, it's deeply frustrating in that I watched the debate on the conversion therapy petition, and I think I just kind of got swept up because I felt that there was massive cross-party support from everybody. I thought Alicia Cairns was fantastic. And I thought, right, okay, this is going to happen. And then to get the robotic response from Kemi Badenoch, and again, when you look at the words that were used, it was just vague. It was woolly, and any sort of vague language just leaves massive space and scope for loopholes. So I was very disappointed with that. And I would say currently this is maybe the most scary time, I would say, to be LGBT plus. I think we have made so much progress in terms of equal marriage. Excuse me, equal marriage, and in Scotland we've got the TIE campaign, the Time for Inclusive Education campaign, about actually implementing LGBT inclusive education throughout schools. That's phenomenal steps forward. For me, it just feels a wee bit like a step back, and I would strongly urge politicians to reaffirm their commitment to the LGBT community, because I think there'll be an awful lot of scared and anxious people out there at the moment.
What would you say to those, many of them scared and anxious, but people, I suppose, in your position, or what you went through when you're going through conversion therapy, because there are many currently going through that right now throughout the country. Some of them might be watching or listening to this on the podcast. What would you say to them? Because many of them may feel, well, you know, the emotions in a way I could never understand. What would you say to them?
You're not alone. You are absolutely 100% not sinful. You are not broken. You do not require fixing. If you want to continue in a religious faith setting, that's fine. God loves you exactly as you are. Look at the Christians in your churches. Do all the women wear hats to church? Do all of their clothes have single fabrics? Do they eat shellfish? If the answers to these questions are, well, no, or yes, they do eat shellfish, then they're not following the Bible to the letter of the law. You don't get to cherry pick the parts of the Bible that suit you. So why do you, as a person that's struggling with same-sex attraction, why do you have to change? Because they're not. You're not broken. You're not sinful. God loves you as you are. And there is a whole host of people in the LGBT community that are happy and willing to welcome you with open arms and to give you the fellowship that you're not, the genuine fellowship and honest fellowship that you're not getting in your church.
Very, very powerful words. And finally, I suppose, you know, there are so many brilliant Christians doing so much work in our communities across the country, including LGBTQ Christians and the LGBTQ allies for Christians, including priests, including people active in all levels of community life, from food banks to work within LGBTQ communities.
Yeah.
To those who call themselves Christians, though, who do claim that homosexuality is innately sinful and requires some form of action in order to cure people of it, what would you say to them?
I think one of the most famous parables is about having a look at yourself before you come for others. So it's about taking the log out of your own eye before you come for the speck of dust in mine. That's what I have to say to them.
Very powerful, Justin. It's a huge honor to be able to talk to you about this. I know it's not easy, and there are lots of people who've gone through what you've gone through, and completely without any judgment, it's totally understandable. Feel it's very difficult to talk about it, but you being able to talk about it does have a massive impact on some of the most vulnerable LGBTQ people in the country who are suffering a horrible form of torture, which has a terrible lasting impact on their lives. And lots of us within the LGBTQ communities have seen the lasting impact on those we love who've had to go through the sorts of experiences you have. So it's very moving to be able to hear, and it just underlines just how important it is that desperate action, urgent action, which is long overdue, is taken to save LGBTQ people, including people who, it must be said, ended up with less fortunate endings than the one you have. So really, really appreciate it, and all my love and solidarity and eternal gratitude for being able to talk.
No, thank you very much. Thank you.